In this video, we're going to walk through a coding solution to the total article likes for author REST API technical interview question. So let's jump in. So in this question, we are given access to a fake REST API. So we have two endpoints. The first is the list endpoint, where we can make GET requests, where it's API articles, and it takes an author query parameter as well as a page. So this will return a JSON array of article objects for that author on the requested page. And each object has at minimum an ID, which is an integer, and a title, which is a string. Pages are contiguous, so if the page K responds with a status code other than 200 or an empty array, there are no further pages. And then the second endpoint is the pair article endpoint. Again, we can make GET requests to this, where we've got API articles and then the article ID, followed by the favorites. So this returns an object of favorites with values integers, which represents the number of times that article has been favorited. If the status code is not 200, treat the article's favorites as 0 and continue. So we need to implement a function that takes an author and iterates over the pages, so it's one indexed. So the first page will be a page of 1, until the list endpoint responds with a non-200 or an empty array. For every article returned, we need to then query its favorite endpoint and accumulate the favorites. If the first list request already fails or is empty, we simply return 0. And if any list request after page 1 fails, we return the partial sum so far. We do not need to retry. And our job then is to return the total favorites as an integer. So let's better understand it by looking at an example. So here we've got an input, we've got author of Alice, and we've got mock data here. So we've got pages, which is an array where we've got 3 inner arrays representing 3 pages. In the first page, we've got 2 objects. The first is an object with an ID of 1 and a title of A. And then the second object has an ID of 2 and a title of B. The second page has 1 object with an ID of 3 and a title of C. And the third page is empty. And then we have favorites here, which is an object with ID. So we've got 1, 2, and 3 representing the different articles, as well as the number of favorites. So in this case, article 1 has 5 likes, article 2 has 10, and article 3 has 3 likes. And so here you can see our output is 18. And well, the reason for that is because we need to sum up all the likes for articles that have IDs 1, 2, and 3. And so if you look here, 1, 2, and 3, they have 5, 10, and 3. And if we add those up, that gives us 18. And if we look at the second example, if we have an author ghost, and if you look at our mock data, we have 1 inner array in our pages, which is empty. And our favorite object also has no fields. And in this case, our output is simply 0, as there is no data to map over. So hopefully that makes sense. Let's jump into the coding solution and make it very clear how it all works. So the first thing I want to do is initialize an accumulator variable that will hold the running sum of likes or favorites. So I'll say let total equals 0, and we're using let here as it is not a constant. Then what I want to do is create an infinite pagination loop starting with the page 1 as it is 1 index, and then the loop ends only when break is called. So I can say for let page equals 1, and then we will have no termination as it is infinite, and it'll only be terminated internally with break statements. And then we can say page plus plus to increment it on each iteration. Then we can wrap this in a try catch, again, as we're making a network request. And again, when we catch any errors here, we just want to break out of that loop. First thing I want to do is create the list URL. So this will be the URL to fetch all of our articles for an author. So I can say const list URL. So here we have the base URL, so example.com/API/articles, and then I need to add on the query parameters. So I'll add author, and then we'll use encode URI component here. And so this will ensure special characters in author don't break the query string, and then we'll also add the page here, which is simply an integer. So once we have that, we can then make our request. So we can say const response equals await fetch list URL, and here we're using await, as this will suspend only the coroutine, not the entire event loop. And then I want to check. So if the status code is not 200, we want to break. So if response.status does not equal 200, well, then we want to break, as again, an issue has arisen or there's no pages left. So therefore we want to break out of this loop. Then we want to get the article. So I can say const articles equals await response.json. So here we're parsing the JSON body into an array of article objects, and any malformed JSON will throw and it will be caught by this outer catch, which will simply break. Then what we want to do is loop over all of our articles and get the number of favorites for each article. So what we can say is for const article of articles. What we can do similarly is make a request now to that article endpoint. So we can say const favorite URL, And so this will again be our API articles. Then we'll pass in our art ID and then get the favorites for that article. And so what we can now do is make that request. So we can say const favorite response equals await fetch favorite URL, like so. And then again, here we want to make sure there's a 200 response code. So we can say if favorite response dot status, if that equals 200, well then what we want to do is we want to increment our total. So we can say total plus equals, and we can say await favorite response dot JSON to convert it to a JavaScript object, and then we can get the favorites off that. So we can say favorites, and then if there's no value, well, we can just default to a 0. So there's no change to favorites. And now what I want to do is, again, we're making another API request here. So what I want to do is I want to wrap this in a try catch. So if there's any issues here, what I want to do is I just simply want to do nothing. So it's essentially like counting 0, because if we're just missing favorites for an article, which is fine, as not every article is guaranteed to have favorites. And so what I can do is I can take that and put it inside our try and just indent it properly. Perfect. So outside of our for loop now, all I need to do is return the total. So I can then say return total like that. So let's run the tests and see if they pass. So I was using art.id and not article.id. So let's run it now and see if it passes. Perfect. The test case passed. Let's run the test suite to make sure it all passes. Perfect. It all passed. So again, it's pretty straightforward. You're hitting 2 endpoints, looping over it. But when you have the time pressure of an interview, it can sometimes get overwhelming, especially when you make one small syntax error, which can throw you out of bounds, even though your logic is sound. So if you want to try it out for yourself, the link to the question is in the description. And hopefully you got some value out of it. If you did, please like and subscribe and share it with a friend. It helps the channel out a lot, and I will see you in the next one.